Welcome back to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm Joey Dwyer here with Brandon Bigsby after Vanderbilt's 85-55 win over Austin Peay. Brandon's at Memorial. Apparently, I keep slacking, Brandon. This is the second game in a row that you've been at Memorial and I've been at home, but I hope you'll forgive me. Vanderbilt, though, a really good day for them. I don't think played its best game, especially not its best second half, but still helped itself. Won by 30, won by 20 plus, and covered the spread. So its net will go up. Its Ken Palm has already gone up to 50th in the country. And overall, I think a day that you leave taking a lot of positives from Vanderbilt outshot Austin Peay 60% to 32% from the field, outshot at 44 to 11% from 3-point range. And from start to finish, this was domination. Vanderbilt, in the first media timeout of the last two games, has only given up 2 points before the media timeout, which is just incredible. They're starting fast. Outside of today, they're taking care of the ball at a high level. We'll talk about why they didn't today or why we don't think they did today. But overall, Vanderbilt doesn't play its best game and still beats a maybe not great mid-major team, but a team that's better than a lot of teams they've played by 30 points. And I think got to take a lot of positives from that, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely, Joey. And I mean, really, it kind of felt like a tale of two halves, really. Mark Byington, after the game, described it as a very weird game overall. I mean, felt like in half number one, like really just everything was clicking for Vanderbilt. The ball was falling. They were getting good looks. They were playing stellar defensively. The turnovers really weren't too much of a problem in the first half. They only turned it over four times in the first half, and they ended up with 17 by the end of the game. So it kind of shows you a little bit of that tale of two halves element that we saw. But I mean, not only that, but we saw a lot of different contributors really in this game. Jason Edwards dropping 16 points, Tyler Nickel having 12. I mean, we saw Chris Manion with 10 or 8 rather. AJ Hogard had 11. So we saw a lot of different players really step up and make their mark in this game. MJ Collins also had a very good game. I believe he had 9 points. Joe, you'd have to check me on that. My computer's dead, so I don't have the stat sheet in front of me. But nevertheless, just so many guys that stepped up and really contributed to what was a rather dominant win for Vanderbilt. That, I mean, they won by 30, and it almost feels like they could have very well have won by 40 or 50 if they had played even half to the way they did in the first half in the second half. So an impressive win overall, I think, for Vanderbilt. Sloppy, obviously, in the second half. Going to want to clean some of those things up. But nevertheless, I think that they'll go home during the Christmas break here with 7 days off upcoming, feeling pretty good about themselves and the way they played today.
Yeah, I think today was indicative of the way they're going to have to win, which is Jason Edwards putting on a show, which I don't know if I would say he put on a show per se today, but had 16 points. Their leading scorer was efficient. And then the rest of the guys are going to have to do their part. And I think everybody kind of did their part today. Grant Huffman had the early bucket, didn't do much else, but he's always a presence. His effect is always felt on the game. Tyler Nickel, like you said, 12 points. Hogard made three threes in the first half. Chris Magnon had a tremendous first half, was all over the court, finished with 8 points, 8 rebounds. Devin McLaughlin, a double figure scorer again. I don't know how many games in a row that is, but it's got to be a couple. MJ Collins had one of his better games today, and Tyler Tanner was a factor as well. Jalen Carey too, 9 and 7 with 4 assists. I think the 4 assists is the thing to note there. But outside of those individual stat lines, I think that is what it has to be, right? Maybe there's going to be guys like MJ Collins steps up at Virginia Tech, Tyler Tanner steps up against Cal, things along those lines. But it's going to be Jason Edwards leading the way, and everybody else is going to have to make shots and do their part. And Brandon, today everybody did that, I thought.
Yeah, not only the 11 points for Devin McLaughlin, but just one rebound shy of another double double as well. Had 9 boards in this game. So, really, again, just another kind of do everything performance for Devin McLaughlin, who I feel like in a weird way can kind of go under the radar to a certain extent just because there's so much that's happening around him and there's so many guard play and all of that stuff. But as you mentioned, Joey, it feels like this is the kind of game to where Vanderbilt, the way they won is how they're going to have to win a lot of these games. Jason Edwards, like you said, maybe not putting on the show, maybe not the 25 to 30 point performance that we've seen from him a couple of times this season, but nevertheless still had 16 points, and a vast majority of those points came in the second half. It wasn't Jason Edwards really just going off and hitting shot after shot after shot that gave them a 30-point lead heading into halftime. It was the other contributors. It was AJ Hogard, it was MJ Collins, it was Tyler Tanner, Chris Magnon, along with others, Jalen Carey, another one that you mentioned as well that I feel like, has quietly gotten a lot better over the last couple of games and seemed to get a little bit more comfortable as the season has progressed. So, I think that today kind of shows a little bit of how Vanderbilt is going to have to win games. But again, Joey, we've talked about the number one thing with this Vanderbilt team is that they have strength in numbers. The depth on this team, I think, is really what showed out again today. 8 players that scored 5 points or more in this game that checked in today Not often you see numbers like that. And again, maybe against an inferior opponent, but still a pretty relatively solid mid-major team against Austin Peay, even though Austin Peay maybe not the team that I know you and I both thought they were, as two guys that kind of followed the A-Stun with the Lipscomb connection, but still a solid team nevertheless that did go and beat a high major team just a month ago in Butler at Hinkle Fieldhouse. So I don't think you can take anything away from Vanderbilt with this one. They move up to 11-1. They looked relatively good doing it outside that second half. And again, I think the biggest thing, just how many players really stepped up and made significant contributions to win this game.
Another thing too is the defense. I think that was one of the more impressive things for me early. Austin Peay has some real issues. They've, I think, two guys that can really beat you, and especially without Hansel Emmanuel, I think are really limited offensively. I thought they had more than just their top guys, and their top guys, I think, were kind of the basis for me saying that they could be an A-Sun contender. And after today, and after what I've seen recently, I don't think they are. But Brandon, holding any team to 31% from the field and 10% from three, it matters. And Vanderbilt, even though it turned it over 17 times, thought it was sloppy, especially in the second half, like you mentioned. Even though it did that, it still had more points off turnovers than Austin Peay, and it's done that in 11 of its 12 games. That's another real testament to what it did. I thought it was really disruptive. I thought it made things really hard on Austin Peay's go-to guys. Pull up the stats, but Say Witt had 7 points on 3 for 9 shooting, and LJ Thomas had 20 points on 17 shots. It's pretty limited in terms of his efficiency. So if you make anybody else on Austin Peay beat you, they can't. And Vanderbilt's going to play much, much more difficult teams down the line. But today, I thought their defense really stepped up, and I think it's been trending positively for a couple weeks. 2 games in a row where they give up less than 60 points, so that's something to note.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you could really go back ever since the trip back in Charleston, where you kind of saw some of those flashes in some of those games where it felt like Vanderbilt really started to kind of feel more cohesive on the defensive end. And I feel like that's something that you and I have both talked about, and we've said it. It's going to take time. This is a new team of players that have never played together before outside of Tyler Nickel and MJ Collins. So really, you have a very new group that's trying to learn a new system, trying to learn a new scheme. They're trying to get comfortable with one another. And I keep going back to what Mark Byington said back in September that they didn't really work on defense at all during the summer. They didn't really start honing in on that until they got into that first practice just about a month and a half before the season started. So we kind of knew it was going to be a work in progress. We knew it was going to take time, but I think you're starting to see that progression and that development with this team on the defensive end really start to make its way. And something else, Joey, I feel like that we haven't talked about too much. I know you mentioned the stat earlier. Vanderbilt shooting 44% from three in this game. That is something that seemed not unfathomable, but felt like it was a far cry in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season where we saw them shooting in the mid to low 20s in multiple games. Seems like lately they've started to kind of get that 3 point shot falling. The looks and the shot selection, I think, has been a lot better as well over these last 4 or 5 games. Really, just as a team, a lot of the weaknesses that I think that we saw from this Vanderbilt team in the first couple weeks of the season, maybe not settled, but they're starting to iron them out more and more. And what more of a perfect time to do that than with SEC play just right around the corner?
And it was also who hit the threes today. MJ Collins hits two, goes 100% from three. AJ Howard hits three. He's 3 for 3 from 3 point range. Tyler Nickel, probably more inefficient than everybody else, but shoots 1 for 5 from three. Those are the three guys that have got to really make shots. Tyler Tanner's got to make a few. Obviously, Jason Edwards is going to get his fair share, but those are the guys that have to make them, and they did today. And I think that's a big step too. The shot making, I think, will be interesting to see once you get to SEC play and play against teams that are more difficult, to be quite frank. But Brandon, I think the positives today are just that they were able to bump their margin of victory up again. They could be top 40 in the net tomorrow when it comes out. And I think that's just not only a testament to what they've done against these teams, but how Mark Byington has scheduled. I tweeted earlier, Mark Byington and staff have nailed scheduling bye games. And I don't think there's any question about that. They've scheduled teams that they can run off the floor, and they've done that for the most part. I do think the scheduling of Power Five teams has hurt them a little bit, and a lot of that isn't their fault. But just looking at it from purely a bye game standpoint, they've been able to kill a lot of these teams, and they did it again today, and that's a real testament to them. That's also really going to help them in March, Brandon.
Yeah, and you mentioned with some of the power conference games, I think that there was a lot of people that thought that teams like Seton Hall, like Virginia Tech, probably would have ended up being a little bit better than what they ended up. I think you could probably throw TCU into that mix as well. They've had some injuries that have really hindered them, I think, from being the level that they could be at. I thought that was a team that maybe could squeak into the tournament conversation. Unfortunately, just the injuries have kind of derailed them a little bit. But you mentioned that just in terms of scheduling games against these mid-major opponents, it feels like over the last few years, that's probably been one of the main criticisms of Vanderbilt, especially with the last staff, was just how they would schedule these games. A lot of the major games they would schedule would really have a lot of risk, but not as much benefit scheduling against teams like VCU on the road and games of that nature. And then right before that, losing to Grambling State at home or having a really, really tight win against USC Upstate or Central Arkansas. And I feel like that goes a lot to the credit of Mark Byington and the staff, the way they constructed the schedule, and not just that, but the way that they've been able to really take care of business in some of these bye games. Because, like I said, a couple of years ago, this was not the case to where Austin Peay comes in. There's a decent roster over there that they've got. And remember, this is a team that got picked to finish second in the A-Sun as well. So this is no scrub at all. And the Governors on the other end, they came in and they wiped the floor with them for the most part. And I feel like there would have been a little bit of concern with one of these Vanderbilt teams in the last few years saying, man, this has potential to be a trap game, and Vanderbilt maybe just wins by 5 or 6, and then it takes a hit a little bit on the net and on the Ken Palm. So I think that Mark Byington and his team deserve a ton of credit for the way they've constructed the schedule, because now just one more game, Joey, December 30th against New Orleans. Got to assume that they'll probably take care of business in that one. If they do, they're looking at being 12-1 heading into SEC play, and I don't think really anyone thought that that was going to be something that was realistic. You felt like maybe there was a chance, but you certainly didn't expect it. This is a team now that has set themselves up in really, really good position for tournament talk and for bubble watch heading into January, especially with the SEC being so stacked. I mean, 7 wins could very well block their way into the tournament in the SEC. So I think Vanderbilt has really put themselves in a good position. And obviously, this is the long view, but if they do make the tournament, I think that scheduling and the way that they crafted this non-conference schedule will probably be the number one reason that they did find their way in the field.
Yeah, I think they're set up really well coming out of this as long as they beat New Orleans. And I don't have any reason to believe that they won't beat New Orleans and do it handily. Brandon, I'm going to set you up for something though. I noticed a quick comment out of you that I got to call you out on because I know you know it's wrong.
Okay.
Grambling State was 2 years ago, and the USC Upstate
Yes.
win. And Brandon, I think you're just jaded, aren't you?
I'm jaded. I've been here for 8 hours. I've seen a lot of basketball today. Look, give me a break on that one. But yeah, Grambling State 2 years ago, they lost that game. Last year, the USC Upstate game. So my apologies for confusing those two. Central Arkansas was last year as well. So I did remember that. But
Mhm.
thank you, Joe. It's what I love about you, man. You always keep me in check, and I appreciate
The
that.
Central Arkansas, the infamous next question game, which again, you never let me hear the end of still to this day, which you know what?
Next question.
Next question. Brandon, final thoughts from today. You've seen a lot of basketball, probably about 2 minutes of close basketball the entire day, but take me through your thoughts on the state of Vanderbilt men's basketball today. And if you want, throw in some women's thoughts as well. You didn't do a rapid reaction for that, did you? You freaking slacker.
Hey, I had a 47-minute turnaround between the men's game and the women's game, and that was with getting out the three takes article for the women. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, I'll go ahead and throw both. I think Shea Ralph and her team deserves some love too. But starting over on the men's side, I mean, Vanderbilt again, just progression. I think is the word. We said it when we talked about it in the season preview, Joey. I think that the number one thing that Vanderbilt as a program wants to see is that they're progressing. I think for so long they've been kind of mired in this, well, Vanderbilt's not a very good program kind of deal. And it's tough to get out of that when you're a team that hasn't made the tournament since 2018. I mean, I'm sitting over on the right side of the gym right now, and I'm looking over at the men's side of the banners. And the last tournament that they had was 2017, 2018. You're talking about 4, 5+ years ago. The kids that they're recruiting now were in fifth and sixth grade the last time they saw Vanderbilt play in March Madness. So there's a little bit of a tiredness that comes with that. And I feel like Vanderbilt had to go out and prove that they were not going to be those same teams. They weren't the same program, and they were on an upward trajectory. And I feel like doing what they've done in the non-conference, we've seen that so far, them really step up, take care of business. And really today was no different. I know Austin Peay, maybe not a great team. They're 4-8, probably not the team that you and I both thought that they would be heading into the year. Maybe not the team that Mark Byington and those guys thought that they would be heading into the year. I think that they maybe thought that this would be their one tough mid-major opponent they would have come in. Instead, they play Austin Peay, who's really struggling to find their rhythm, and they're 4-8 and 274th in the net rankings. But nevertheless, you still have to play who's in front of you. It's still a really talented roster on the other end. And Vanderbilt went in, took care of business, and did it in the way that you would want to see them win games, not just against an opponent like this, but in a way that I think is rather sustainable in the SEC, barring they clean up some of the sloppy play and stuff in the second half. On the women's side, I mean, again, just Vanderbilt taking care of business and Shea Ralph and that program kind of on that upward trajectory. And you kind of feel like Mark Byington's program in a weird way is kind of in a similar place to where Shea Ralph and them were in year one, to where you kind of have to reset the bar because the program had been down for so long. But we didn't even see the women's program start out with an 11-1 record and really have genuine aspirations to make the tournament. But yet here they are now getting top 25 votes and looking like one of the stronger teams in the SEC. Camille Pierre with another astounding day. Michaela Breaks with another great day as well. I mean, really just the state of both programs, really the state of Vanderbilt athletics, if you want to throw football in there too, is probably as healthy as I think I've personally ever seen it in my 23 years of life this fall at this program and all of the programs throughout that time. So I think it's a pretty good time to be a Vanderbilt fan. I think you'll go into Christmas feeling really good about where both programs lie right now. And really, I think it's the SEC play. It's going to be the big teller. One more non-conference game for both sides, both bye games, the women against Alabama A&M, the men against New Orleans. Got to assume that they'll probably win that one as well pretty handedly. But then when you get into January, Joey, I think that's when things really get interesting. And I'm going to be excited to see how both teams handle that, especially on the men's side, considering that now, I don't know if we were going to be here, a few months ago, but now Vanderbilt really is in that tournament conversation. If they play their cards right, they could be playing very, very meaningful basketball heading into March in Bridgestone Arena for the SEC tournament.
For sure. Brandon, thanks for being there today. Obviously, not a slacker. That was a joke. Brandon sat through about 5 hours of basketball today and gave us great coverage. Check it out at vandysports.com and check out the Shea Ralph and Mark Byington pressers on YouTube today. But want to wish congratulations to our newly graduated Brandon Bigsby, now what's it called? For now, a full-time VandySports.com basketball contributor. So certainly put in his full-time hours today. Brandon, thanks for being there. But a good day for Vanderbilt hoops as it's one game away from SEC play, and I think has a lot to prove coming up then. But it certainly passed its first few tests with flying colors. It's showing all the signs of a good team. And Brandon and I are going to be here the whole way, one or two more games until we're back there together, and we're going to enjoy the time away. But or I will at least. Brandon's gonna be there celebrating the new year, ringing it in. Apparently, is how ladies there. But Brandon, I think they probably want you out of there. But we'll talk to you later. And thanks for coming on. Thanks for watching. God bless and peace.